Hello all, welcome to NetBook and welcome back to Mulesoft tutorials. Today I'm planning to talk about how we can simulate API calls with a mocking service. As part of this video, I'm going to talk about how we can simulate using an internal URL, how we can simulate using the public URL, and how we can set default mocking service. We have designed the API specification, that is API design, we have done it in Design Center. Let me go to the Design Center, start designing. I'm going to take Contacts API. So during the design phase, you can simulate API calls using this mocking service. As soon as you build this Contact API design, it is going to create a mocking services and we can simulate that calls. The first thing is how we can simulate using the internal URL. In API specification, if we have defined the base URL over here, if you see this is the base URL for my API if I'm giving, if it is a valid URL, if you have given over here, you can connect with this mock service URL. You can give the mock service URL over here and you can connect with that. Otherwise, internally, there is a mocking service it is going to generated by the design center. Now I'm going to simulate this contacts API with a mocking service. The first thing I'm going to show is internal URL. So either we can select this one or auto generated mocking service. Go on this documentation over here, and if we can select any of these methods over here, you can check that simulation. I'm going to select get method over here and click on try it. Over here, if we see that we have the request select server over here. Over here, whatever the URL I have given as a base path, that is what it is showing in the drop down, this one. The second one is the default mocking service, which is generated by the API Design Center. Now I'm selecting as mocking design, this mocking service, the default one which is selected, and I can, pass it a request over here, send a request. Now we should able to see the response over here. So this is how I can get the contact details, all the contacts using this URL. This is the mocking URL. This is the internal URL, the internal mocking URL. I can copy this URL and click on browser. If I can paste it in a browser and click on enter, you see that there is an error, no organization header is. That means if you want to use this internal mocking URL, you should pass it the headers also along with this URL. Okay, so that is how we can use that internal mocking URL. Now, how I can use public URL? The second thing is I want to use simulate using the public URL. To make it your public URL, this mocking service, what you can do, there is a mocking server configuration. Click on over here. There is a make public. What you can do, make over here, the public over here. Now this is your public URL. You can copy this URL. Now if I'm going to go this URL over here, I can replace this entire URL with the public URL over here and enter now. Now we can see you are able to see the response over here. That means with the public URL, you can test it from the outside of API designer also through the browser externally also we can test it. But with internal URL, you need to pass the headers and all. That is one thing. Now you can set this public URL also expiration date. This is not a mandatory. Imagine you don't want this URL to be enabled after certain days. Maybe after 1 month you want to disable that. You can set that also over here. Maybe after September 7th, I don't want to enable this URL anymore. This URL will be automatically will expire. That also we can configure over here, but this is optional. So that is how we can use these public URLs and internal URLs. The next thing is I want to show is setting default mocking service. So we can configure the default mocking server URL over here. Go to this mocking service configuration. Under that, over here, local settings, select by default. Over here you can see mock service will be selected by default. You can click on this. So when you enable this, now if I go back to my API specification, and over here I can select the documentation. Then if I go to the get method, over here click on try. Over here you can see automatically by default the mocking service is going to select as my default URL. So this is how we can simulate API calls using the mocking service which is provided internally by the API Design Center. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe NetBook. For the documentation, you can look at description section. See you in the next video. Thank you.